I'd like to welcome you all, both in person and via Zoom, to today's event. Let's do launch, a celebration of friendship, deep schmooze, and the publication of Henry Greenspan's Remnants and What Remains, Moments from a Life Among Holocaust Survivors, part of the Made in Michigan Writers Series by Wayne State University Press, 2025. I'd also like to welcome you all to the University of Michigan-Dearborn, home of the Voice Vision Holocaust Survivor Oral History Archive. The archive informally began as a partnership between its founder, Professor of History at U of M Dearborn, Sid Bolkosky, and a gentleman named John Mames in the early 1980s. As Sid told it, he was under the impression that when he met with Mames, that he would be one of several people doing the interviews. But when he met with Mames, Mames said, "You're it." Sid and John had, as Sid puts it in an interview, a little l'chaim, and the partnership began. John would give Sid the names and contact information of people who wished to be interviewed. Sid would then make contact and set up the interview, sometimes, according to Sid, conducting up to 3 interviews a week, which is a lot. Eventually, Sid began using the interviews in a course that he began to taught here at U of M Dearborn on the Holocaust. And in order to facilitate this, he enlisted the help of the Mardigian Library to begin storing and cataloging the tapes and eventually to begin videotaping them as well. And I have 2 people I'd like to really thank quickly for that: Barbara Kriegel, who oversaw the archive for many, many years, and Greg Taylor, who you can't see in the back, who's running this wonderful technical setup, who videotaped most of the on-campus interviews. By 1993, the Voice Vision Archive was formally established on this campus, and in 1998, the archive's website, which now contains the over 180 of these interviews, along with transcripts, audio, and video, was established. To put this into some context, the 3 largest collections of Holocaust survivor interview projects in North America, the Fortunoff Video Archive at Yale University, the Montreal Holocaust Center, and the Shoah Visual History Archive, which everybody just calls the Spielberg, were founded in 1979 for the Fortunoff, and the other 2 in 1994. Right. So Sid was doing this work well before these other people were doing it, except with the exception maybe of the Yale University project.
And me.
And Hank, you're in here.
Sorry.
This places the work of Sid and Hank and others among the forefront of those who are willing to listen, not just record, but to listen and talk and form bonds with survivors that they were talking with and listening to have a schmooze, to share a meal, and maybe even a little l'chaim. To say this is not to disparage those other projects mentioned above. Each has its value and its own way of doing things. I do mention it, however, to highlight what Hank calls, quote, the Michigan method, end quote, of interviewing survivors and the important but sometimes overlooked contribution that smaller projects like Voice Vision add and have added to the study of the Holocaust. Finally, I'd like to thank the University of Michigan's Inclusive History Project for its generous co-sponsorship grant covering the costs of today's event. And I would also like to thank our 3 panelist participants, John K. Roth, Malin Thor Tureby, and Christine Schmidt, for their time and insight. Hank, I turn it over to you.
Yeah.
Quick.
I'm not going to move. Is that going to be all right, camera-wise? I'll move later. I just wanted to say a special thank you to the 3 people you are about to hear. As I wrote in an email to them recently, there are no other 3 people in the world whom I'd be more honored and more pleased to have at this occasion, truly. So that's all I want to say now. I'll be saying a little more later, but enjoy hearing from some superhuman people. Not like Superman, but super in the prosaic sense, but in a profound way as well. So, welcome, my friends, and it's yours.
All right. I'd like to start by introducing our first panelist speaker, John K. Roth, who is the Edward J. Sexton Professor of Philosophy Emeritus at Claremont McKenna College, where he taught for more than 40 years and was the founding director of the Center for the Study of the Holocaust, Genocide, and Human Rights. He is internationally renowned for his work in Holocaust and genocide studies and has authored and edited over 50 books. In 1988, he was honored as the U.S. National Professor of the Year by the Council of Advancement and Support of Education and the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. And that's just for starters.
That's just for starters.
We're going to leave it there. So, John?
I'm deeply honored to be present for this celebration of Hank Greenspan's career, and in particular his new book, Remnants and What Remains. Hank and I have known each other for more than 30 years. We're close and dear friends. In Hank's acknowledgments for Remnants and What Remains, he kindly mentions me, noting that he and I first met because of our shared love for William James, a teacher of both of ours. It's fitting, therefore, that I share a paragraph from a book of mine, which goes like this. In 1966, I completed my doctoral dissertation on the American philosopher William James. His lifelong conviction held that, and I quote now from James, that philosophical study means the habit of always seeing an alternative, of not taking the usual for granted, of making conventionalities fluid again, of imagining foreign states of mind. I share that outlook, I wrote. It informs this book. The endnote for the James quotation in my statement says that James's statement comes from an early essay called The Teaching of Philosophy in Our Colleges, which he published in 1876. Then the note adds, I am indebted to Henry Greenspan for the quotation. The book I alluded to when sharing the James quotation that Hank brought to my attention has a title and a focus on events, themes, and questions that also link Hank and me. That book, a kind of companion, at least to me, for Remnants and What Remains, is called The Failures of Ethics: Confronting the Holocaust, Genocide, and Other Mass Atrocities. Hank is in it in more ways than one. His moments from a life among Holocaust survivors are related to mine about the ways in which multiple failures of ethics contributed to the Holocaust and to the testimonies that survivors recount about that catastrophe. Those failures are at play, I think, in Hank's Remnants and in What Remains, including the characters and scenes that Hank's brilliant playwriting continues to create. Especially for me, Rubinstein, the mad jester of the Warsaw Ghetto, who plays, Hank says, in spite of death. William James pioneered the early science of psychology while breaking new ground in philosophy along the way. His longest book was among his earliest, a 2-volume Principles of Psychology, which appeared in 1890. One of its chapters is called Attention, a timely topic in our distracted world. James's insights about intention stressed, and I quote now, that the number of things we may attend to is altogether indefinite, depending on the power of the individual intellect, on the form of the apprehension, and on what the things are. James thought attention was central to choice and human freedom. I am so thankful that Hank directed and sustained his attention in the way he has uniquely done. We are blessed to have remnants and what remains as a result. I was pleased and honored to be asked for a comment that Wayne State University Press could use to help bring deserved attention to Hank's new book. What happened after I wrote the comment was as interesting as the challenge of doing justice to Hank's book in a very few words. Here's the blurb I wrote. I said, this moving autobiographical narrative about Hank Greenspan's moments from a life among Holocaust survivors stands with the legendary testimony of Primo Levi and Jean Amaury. What remains from Greenspan's exceptional playwriting and performance, from his lifelong listening and deep recounting, includes this classic, a book bound for intense reading and ongoing study as it connects memory and memorial, making loss and resistance against it inseparable. Hank's editor really liked my comment, but Hank wasn't sure that he did. And some conversation emerged, just a kind of schmooze emerged as a result. And here's why. My comparing his testimony to Primo Levi's and Jean Amaury's jarred Hank's modesty. The editor and I rightly prevailed, but it is a good question to consider why my attention to remnants and what remains led me to place it alongside, say, Primo Levi's The Drowned and the Saved and Jean Amaury's At the Mind's Limits. A long story could unfold about that, but here are two notes in it. The first chapter of Levi's Drowned and the Saved is called The Memory of the Offense. Every time Hank performs remnants, and what he writes to is in the service of that immensely important work. Jean Amaury's 1977 preface to his book At the Mind's Limits says, nothing is resolved, no conflict is settled, no remembering has become a mere memory. What happened, happened, but that it happened cannot be so easily accepted. Those words could be Hank's, too. Feelings and moods like Levi's and Amaury's inform Hank's attention and thereby ours. They are timely for us now. They are even, I believe, key parts of what Hank means by the schmooze. Hank's survivor friend Victor paid attention, and so did Hank. You study me, and I study you, Victor said to Hank. You look at me with eyes that want to find out what is behind my own eyes. I try to answer with what is of the heart, said Victor. And you store it, he said of Hank. You remember it. The connection between one individual and the other. Thank you, Hank Greenspan, for paying attention in the ways you have done and continue to do. As Victor would say, it is good.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Our next speaker panelist is Malin Thor Tureby. She's a professor of history and head of research at the Department of Society, Culture, and Identity in Malmö, Sweden. At Malmö University in Sweden. Her research is situated at the intersections of Holocaust studies, oral history, and cultural heritage studies. She is a founding member of the Association of Oral History in Sweden and currently the PI, Principal Investigator of the research project Memory and Activism, Survivors Remembering, Commemorating, and Documenting the Holocaust. Please welcome Malin Thor Tureby.
Thank you, and thank you for that introduction. And thank you for the invitation to say a few words today. I'm deeply honored. And before I begin, I would like to offer a brief apology. I am currently recovering from a cold, so you may hear a sneeze or a cough during my talk. And I hope you will bear with me, despite not feeling entirely well. I truly did not want to miss the opportunity to be here and take part of this important and joyous event. Because it is a great honor to speak about and to someone whose work has profoundly shaped my own thinking and practice. I first came across Hank's work when I was invited by the journal Holocaust Studies to review the second edition of his book on listening to Holocaust survivors beyond testimony. At that time, I was on parental leave with my second daughter, and my initial reaction was to decline the offer. But for some reason, I didn't, and I'm so glad I didn't. Because I can honestly say that On Listening to Holocaust Survivors has been one of the most important and inspiring books I have ever read. And today, of course, it stands alongside the book we are all gathered here to celebrate. At that time, I didn't know Hank. We had never met. But as all of you who have read his work will agree on, his writing truly stands out. It's a big part of what makes his scholarship so powerful and so easy to connect with. Even when he is writing, it feels like a conversation. It is as he is reaching out to the reader, genuinely wanting to include us, to share ideas, and to think together with him and Agi and the other survivors. Years later, I finally had the chance to talk with Hank in person when I invited him to give a keynote lecture at the conference hosted by the Swedish Holocaust Museum, a museum that is being built with the intention of centering the voices of and stories of survivors. After that, we began meeting regularly online. Sometimes it was just the two of us, and sometimes as part of a small group that gathers in Hank's Zoom room on Sundays to talk about what happens beyond the interview. And I think a few of you are here today. Christine is here, and I'm so happy to be here together with you. It is difficult to overstate how important these meetings have been for me, both personally and professionally. They have offered not only intellectual nourishment, but also a sense of community and of shared purpose. It is also difficult to overstate the impact it's had on the two of my research field, the field of oral history and the field of Holocaust studies. His approach to engaging with Holocaust survivors has not only reshaped how we think about testimonies and interviews, but has also offered a deeply ethical model for how we listen, how we relate, and how we build knowledge together, how we learn together. Hank's approach to engaging with Holocaust survivors is not only methodological, innovative, it is ethical, transformative. In a field where testimony has often meant a single structured interview, Hank chose a radically different path. He returned to the same individuals again and again, and he built relationships and sustained conversations. This way of working has ethical implications that go far beyond methodology. It challenges us to think about what it means to truly listen and to truly hear another person. Martin Buber wrote, "All real living is meeting." Hank's work embodies this idea. His conversations are not transactions, they are encounters. Hank, Agi, and the other survivors that he worked with has given us more than a method. Hank has given us a model of care and of ethical engagement. They have shown us that the most meaningful work happens not in the moment of recording an interview, but in the long arc of relationship. For all of this, for Hank's scholarship, for his commitment to survivors, and for the many conversations we shared over the years, I am deeply grateful. I'm especially thankful also for the way, Hank, you have shown up in my life beyond the professional, for talking me through the loss of my best friend Sophie, and for our friendship today. These moments of connections, of real meetings, although we always meet online, have meant more to me than I can fully express. So thank you, Hank, for everything.
Thank you.
Thanks, Malin. Our final panelist speaker, Dr. Christine Schmidt, earned her PhD from Clark University in 2003 and is taught as an adjunct distance education lecturer at Gratz College and the University of Maryland Global Campus. She's also worked with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum on the Encyclopedia of Camps and Ghettos and served as the director of the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous in New York. She's also the Deputy National Coordinator for EHRI UK, the UK's national node of the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure. She's also the Deputy Director for Research at the Wiener Holocaust Library in London. And I'll add, Chrissy is a graduate of the University of Michigan-Dearborn. She studied under Sid in the honors program, and we're very happy to claim her as one of our own. Come back one day and visit us. Please welcome Christine Schmidt.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks. I wish I could be there in person. Thank you so much. I wanted, of course, first to start by thanking Hank and Jamie and everyone who organized today, and for the invitation to take part. As my co-panelists have said, I'm really honored because, as Jamie said, U of M Dearborn was my old stomping ground, and Hank's work means so much to me, both personally and professionally. And as I think Hank's work shows, the boundary between those two things is rather blurred anyway. Hank and I came to know each other when I was a student there, where I studied, as Jamie said, with Sid and worked for the honors program and also for Sid's former and now Jamie's remarkable project, the Voice Vision Archive. And as we know, Sid and Hank both interviewed Holocaust survivors in Michigan, and they developed separate but deeply connected approaches through countless conversations, or as Hank calls it, the deepest of schmoozes, with survivors and each other. Sid, as you might imagine, who introduced us, was hugely formative to both my and Hank's thinking about the Holocaust, and I think to us as human beings. And through that connection, Hank and I have remained colleagues and comrades for many years. And so I appreciate that today is about Hank, but also about dear Sid, whom we both miss every day. To prepare for today, I reread Remnants, What Remains, in part out loud, I think in the spirit in which Hank intended. The texts, I think, are written that way, to be spoken, to be heard. And although I'm no actor, I was struck again by how much the theme of voice recurs in Hank's work. Voices lost, recovered, voices that surprised, it seems even their owners. Voices like Abe Pasternak's, one of Hank's survivor friends and Sid's survivor friends, which was probing and wry, who could turn, I think, the deepest pain into humor that left you both laughing and thinking at the same time. I worked alongside Abe transcribing and correcting transcripts of the recorded interviews Sid did for Voice Vision. And I was also struck by this similar humbling experience of transcribing and re-listening that Hank had when he transcribed his own interviews, how silences, emphasis, intonation carried their own imprints in Hank's words. Transcribing next to Abe was always an adventure, as he often corrected my non-existent Yiddish, as we discussed the tangle of ethnic, linguistic, and national complexity of Transylvania. And another Abe memory stands out when Sid gave him a paper I had written about his interview that he had done with Sid for one of Sid's classes, of course, with my permission. And Abe sat down in class the next day and sort of sitting in front of me and turned around, waving the paper in his hand, saying, "We have to talk." It was both exhilarating and terrifying. So back to Hank. One of, I think, the most striking things about Hank's approach, and it's central to Remnants and What Remains, is that, as Malin has said, it stands apart from what became the dominant model of survivor testimony. In so many projects, the aim was a single interview, often with a stranger, usually framed as a kind of declaration and captured as a done deal. And of course, this has its place. It's extremely important. But Hank's practice, as we know, was different. From the beginning, survivors themselves invited him back. His practice became one of sustained conversation, not only listening once, but listening again and re-listening and listening together. And that's how Hank and survivors like Abe and Aggie Rubin came to what she called learning together. One thought sparking another, memories resurfacing, and meaning made really in real time in friendship. And I think that distinction between declaration and exploration, between testimony and conversation, is really at the heart of Hank's new remarkable book. Remnants is a play built from long layered dialogue and a retelling in different voices. And What Remains is Hank's own memoir of those conversations and friendships, remembering the people behind them, Aggie, Abe, Sid, and so many others. And I think that's a real gift that Hank has given us, not only the words of survivors, but the relationships from which those words were spoken and those voices emerged. But it's also a challenge, I think, to carry forward that way of listening and that way of learning together, even as survivors themselves pass from our midst. And today, when it seems that learning together is farther away from us than we can really fathom. So, Hank, thank you for the play, for the memoir, for your teaching, for your friendship, and for the deep schmooze you have sustained across decades. Back in 2013, you wrote this of Sid when he died, but I think it equally applies to you. Sid did not just gather testimonies. He engaged survivors as our brothers, sisters, comrades, and friends. They were part of a wider extended family that Sid created, and which may signify his achievements most of all. So for me personally, this has always been both an intellectual and deeply human work. And this is something I learned from both you and Sid, Hank. And as I've said elsewhere, if Sid became like a father to me, and he and Hank considered themselves brothers, then this makes Hank my academic uncle. And it's therefore very professionally and personally meaningful to me to celebrate your book today, but also to grieve those whom we've lost. So congratulations on your book and what I know will be a continuing conversation.
Thank you.
Did you want me to introduce you?
No,
Oh, well, there you go.
I've
grabbed these
introduced
by
enough.
Okay, I grabbed these by accident. They're yours.
Uh-oh. Okay. I've been overly introduced. So I will just go, except to say thank you again to my beloved friends. Even though Jamie grabbed my notes, but not all of them. Okay. I want to say, first of all, again, thank you. And I want to say a couple of words about Sid from a personal perspective as well. As you know, this occasion and this book are dedicated to Sid. We're here, of course, because this was Sid's turf. This was his place. It's where he taught, where he administered, and where Voice Vision, as Jamie described, came into being. Sid was the best interviewer I ever knew, by far. Not that we don't have other good ones, including the folks whom you heard. But he was the most informed, the most sensitive, and the most present. And he did his homework between meetings. He did his homework. He didn't go on forever as I did, but he, in a way, did, because besides the interviews and the pre-interviews that he did, which often went longer, he hung out with people, and they hung out with him. They could show up, like Abe, here at Voice Vision, sometimes, as Lori can tell us, at your home, right? Oh, the survivors are here, like the pizza. I mean, they would just show up because they knew they would not only be welcome, but there was a community there. And that was, as others have said, part of this place was a community. And I think the best, quote, oral history projects are like that. People get connected. And this was a gathering place. And really, again, because of Sid. You heard about Abe coming and working on the archive and translating. And I can imagine what he would have said to Christine if they'd had that. Maybe they did have that conversation. He would say, what are you saying about me? I understand. He would love it, and he would have fun, and he would be honored, of course. Sid was a connector, and we're talking a lot about connection today. Connection invariably leads to disconnection, that is, to loss. And both are central themes today. And so is gratitude, which is part of what comes from loss, at least if we're lucky. Gratitude for all that we shared, the connections that once were. I met Sid in 1980. We called each other brother, which is what we were in every sense but the biologic. Imagine the privilege of knowing somebody 30 minutes away or a phone call away, doing the same essential work, knowing the same, mostly survivors, dedicated to the same vision, which has already been described. And some of the same words was interesting that came to me. So I'll just say it comes down to engaging survivors as fellow human beings. How simple is that, and yet how difficult it has been. Our brothers and sisters, not mainly as historical sources, not as artifacts of the Holocaust, or objects of knee-jerk veneration, which is also patronizing, although it may be meant in the most honorable way. But our goal was honest, solid, genuine conversation. We've already heard the word schmooze multiple times. You'll hear it again. I can't resist. And of course, above all, not above all, but beside all of that was the conversation between ourselves, which is what we called it, the conversation. At every opportunity. In our offices, on the phone, weddings, bar mitzvahs, other family occasions, boom, we're within 200 yards of each other like magnets. We're together, having the conversation. Because we were obsessed, and we were engaged. And we would share this incredible thing. Abe said this thing. Always Abe's story. Augie said this thing. Others said these amazing things. And we wanted to understand as well as we could. So the same kind of engaged conversation that we aspired to with survivors is what we had with each other, honing our understanding together, getting to places that neither one of us could possibly have reached alone. So these conversations with Sid were the foundation really of all my own work. I truly can't imagine having been able to do whatever it is I've been able to do without those conversations. And that's why this day and this book had to be dedicated to Sid. There really was no other rational choice. One last bit, which is trivial in a way, but human, which makes it not trivial in a different way. At the start of what turned out to be the last week of Sid's life, Nancy, my wife, suggested that we stop by Sid, see him. Of course, we didn't know the significance of that week at that moment. So we did in Oak Park, and I brought over, and a few of you here and out there know, my drug of choice, as was his, which is Lagavulin single malt scotch. Sid was obviously ill, dying of liver cancer. He was fatigued, to say the least, but he was fully there, mentally, psychologically. So I poured a wee dram, maybe not so wee, for him and for myself. And I said, well, bro, at least you won't have to worry about your liver. One more toast here to Sid Bolkosky, my brother, in every sense of spirit. I want to turn to some of our other close people who have been mentioned, interestingly and importantly, already by others, and with whom I would also, and he would too, raise a glass or more. And occasionally we did. So first, this is from What Remains. Some of you have no remnants. You can look it up. Why read it if you could see the movie, right? I mean, it's online. It's easy. And I recommend that. So this is all from the second part of the book, from What Remains. Most of the survivors I first met 50 years ago are gone. I'm not sure why I say gone, as though they've only left, as though they might be back. Sometimes I say they're no longer on the planet, as though they might be on another planet. Beyond my family, being with survivors, yes, schmoozing with survivors, thinking and writing about my schmoozing with survivors, has been the center of my life. Augie Rubin was the center of the center. For 8 months in 1980, we met every Monday for an interview that became a conversation, that became a friendship, that became a co-authored book. We met over coffee, cigarettes, and lunch, in various order. Augie was Hungarian, or in that Transylvanian area anyway, and she cooked like one. Paprikash, paprikash, paprikash. Over the years of conversations, Augie and I didn't just talk about the war, of course, we talked about everything. We shared our lives. She met all my girlfriends from that time, and for whatever reason, she remembered one of them as Diane. I never went out with a Diane. Maybe I should have. Perhaps somewhere out there, there's a Diane Paprikash. Who knows? Seders at Augie's were unique, besides the incredible food. The guests called themselves the Hungarian Mafia. Doctors, lawyers, dressmakers, shopkeepers, no gangsters as far as I know. They welcome me even though I'm part Galicianer, part Viennese, and maybe a little Litvak. They'd ask me. But as is Passover tradition, they welcomed the stranger. Augie was pleased with, I'd say proud of, my reconstruction of her own memories in remnants, the vanity, her story as the anchor of the play. She came to many performances, both before and after I began doing it solo. In one of the befores was a production by a well-known professional Jewish theater in Detroit. And like many professionals theater doing Holocaust-themed plays, they went way over the top. If there's any topic that doesn't need over the top, it's the Holocaust. Less is more. Even less is often even more. And after the performance, Augie sidled up to me and whispered, "Never let them do it again." She then took a step back and winked. "Never again." You have to be in the mafia to say stuff like that. In later years, when I heard Augie recount the experience that Vanity recalls, I realized that she retold it increasingly like the version that's reconstructed in Remnants. I don't mean verbatim, but closer to its pacing, connections, conclusions. In essence, she was borrowing back my retelling that I borrowed from her. Whoever was retelling it, the vanity had developed between us. Now, I confess I felt giddy and guilty when I first noticed this. Born in New York after the war, barely, I had influenced the survivors' testimony, even in effect co-wrote some of it. But then I realized that many of the stories we tell, especially the most important, are co-written in one way or other. They often develop between us. For example, we share a memory with a friend, someone who knows us well, and they may suggest a metaphor, connection, theme that helps capture what we were trying to convey. And the next time we tell that story, what we call our story, we may well draw on our friend's metaphor, connection, theme without giving them a footnote. Footnotes aren't needed. All that is needed is good conversation and often good friends. Good conversation, deep schmooze, as I often call it, as you know, is for me the goal of everything, whether with survivors, students, colleagues, people in general. Deep schmooze will not solve the world, unfortunately, but it is hard to imagine anything without it that will. In 2016, I received a voicemail from Augie. She was in the hospital, and she said she needed my help. She said there was one more chapter we needed to write. It would be about all the people who had helped her through her life. It would be a chapter of gratitude. The book that Augie and I co-authored had been published 10 years earlier. Of course, I knew there was no possibility of adding a chapter, but logic in such instances is beside the point. The next day I went to the hospital. Augie was dying of emphysema and barely able to breathe. She recognized me, but not much more. And she didn't mention the chapter that she'd imagined the day before. So this memory must itself represent part of that chapter, that gratitude, which I return. From these 50 years of life among survivors, Augie and others you will meet, gratitude is a large part of what remains. Now another survivor whom we've already heard about and a little bit from, Abe Pasternak, and like Sid, in those conversations, telling Abe stories like Christine did. I mean, we could have gone on, I won't, for days. Memorable man, as you will hear and know. In our first interview in 1980, Abe asked me, "So Hank, you're a psychologist." Yeah, I answered, I'm still in training. In training, okay. So as a psychologist, still in training, do you think we're crazy? Do you think the survivors are all crazy? I treaded water. As usual, Abe rescued me. Of course we're crazy. You'd have to be crazy to go through something like that and not be crazy. As I said, I love telling Abe stories. He was a hot dog, which had maybe a little to do with surviving the Holocaust. But his stories from childhood, well before the war, were mostly about standing up to big shots and how he likes to reden. You know Yiddish? You don't know Yiddish. Reden. To speak out. Reden. I'm not shy. Ask my wife. I'm not shy. I didn't have to ask his wife. Abe especially enjoyed visiting university classes. I was a little Jewish kid in Romania. Now you professors invite me, big shots, right? Invite me to the big University of Michigan, so maybe I'm not such a little kid anymore. In one Holocaust history class, not mine, I used to go with him to the other classes, a student got up and asked the most obsessively qualified question I'd ever heard. I was wondering, you think the Roosevelt administration, well, maybe they could have done more, during the war, if they had wanted during the war. This went on. Abe waves his hand to shut him up, and really to put him and the rest of us out of misery. Then he said, I can answer your question in 3 words. We got screwed. As usual, he brought down the house. No one read an audience better than Abe. It's not simple. When Abe exclaimed, of course we're crazy, and so on, he was not only doing shtick for me, although he partly was. He also told me about days when his inner Nazis, as he called them, got the upper hand. He became anxious about losing everything. His business, his family, the life he created after the war. There was no obvious danger at these times. In that sense, he was out of touch with reality. But he was certainly not out of touch in general. Losing everything was precisely what happened to him as to so many others. It would be truly crazy not to imagine that happening again. And I'm sad to say, even today, more than ever in my lifetime. This is not about memory. It's about knowledge, in the bones knowledge. So again, complexity, contradiction, which I've always argued we need to hold on to. And like William James, right? Let's not dumb it down. Let's not simplify it. Let's not find integration where there isn't any. Let's let things be as complicated, multifaceted as they are, especially when we're talking about each other. Not only survivors, but really all of us have multiple personalities, if I can put it that way, and multiple sides. Let's let that be. But for survivors, it's, I suppose, particular meaning. And here again, Augie. We survivors are a bundle of contradictions. When we're here, we're also there. And even the past is split in two. Memories of home, which we usually try to recapture, and memories of the destruction of home, which we usually try to forget. So there are many strands at once. One world reminds us of the other. One thought leads to the next and into the past. It is not that our joys are not real. I really want to underline that. It is not that our joys are not real. They are entirely real. It is just that they never exist simply by themselves. They're always in reference to something else, something that can consume them in an instant. And then there are simply the blank spaces, the spaces where things were that are not anymore. Even when home and life are recreated, the losses are never made whole. The losses are never made whole. I suppose that's often true with loss. But when you lose a world, that much more obviously. I was with Augie in 1993 and her incredible husband, Zoli, who we lost recently. At the opening of the museum, some of you, I probably weren't there, but it was a cold, wet, brutally windy day in Washington. It was April, but nevertheless, it felt like November or December. The mall stretching out behind the new museum was a field of mud. Some of the survivors, this is survivor humor, they said, this is like Zelapel, roll call in the morning in Auschwitz or wherever, whatever camp. The mud, the field. Some organized green plastic garbage bags to use as sort of ersatz umbrellas, in the midst of this madness. Augie remembered that day and said, for years, I saw my mother floating in the air, in the smoke, in the wind, and I couldn't reach her. I couldn't bring her down. We want to feel that our dead are somewhere, and what happened to them are somewhere, and not simply erased. We want to believe that the museum is a place to remember, even a grave, even a cemetery. But I must tell you that this is improvisation. This is pretending, and we know it. We want to believe it even as we are reminded that it is cold and it is raining, and the wind still blows. We can improvise. We can borrow a museum to stand in for cemeteries that exist nowhere. But yes, there are limits. That's as far as one can go. The wind still blows. Augie's mother improvised during the first moments of their arrival in Auschwitz. Augie is sent to one side, her mother and little brother to the other. And Augie ran over to be with them, with her family. But the SS shoved her back. They pushed her to the ground. Effectively, we'll kill you when we want to. Her mother saw this happening, even as her own line was led away to the gas. Go, my child, go. We will see each other tomorrow, her mother said. And Augie says, and I've been going ever since then. I want to stay with loss as I finish today. On one side, there's survivors' loss of a world. That's what genocide means, obviously. Erasure. Complete erasure. And there is also the loss of survivors themselves, to which I'll return. And finally, there's a third loss, which is survivors' own death, which we perhaps speak less about. And I will very briefly today. As we lose survivors, and of course we know in the last 10, 20 years we've lost many, Holocaust museums, education centers, programming related, become increasingly forward-looking. I mean, it makes a kind of sense. The rhetoric is about future generations, teaching resilience, transmitting the legacy from generation to generation, passing the story, etc. Many institutions have dropped the word memorial entirely. The former Holocaust Memorial Center, not far from here, is now the Holocaust Center. Other centers, including the one in Montreal, have done the same. Meanwhile, as survivors approach their deaths, they move in the opposite direction. I've been with a number of survivors at the end of their lives, or close to it. And in general, they speak about those who will follow with love and hope. But dying survivors return to their foundations, to the people, the life, the world to which they once belonged, and in the best cases, in which they were most unambiguously cherished. In imagination, memory, and dreams, they construct their own memorial centers, and they speak to us from there. One last time for me today from Augie. This is a passage that I read in every class I teach and used to teach, usually at the end of that class. What is the word they always use? That word, legacy, legacy, legacy. What is my legacy? We who are there know how limited can be any parent's ability to prepare the younger generation for what can happen. But then I think of my own parents, the legacy that I myself received, and I realize it's made up of small things that turned out to be precious to me, things I gathered up as much because I needed them as because my parents wanted me to have them. I barely remember my mother's face, but I somehow remember her principles, certain ways one tries to live one's life. My father, who survived the war, was with me through much more of my life. It was a full, mature relationship, and yet, when I think of him, I remember certain moments. I remember the way he sang Ein Kelohenu, one of our Jewish prayers. And whenever I'm at the synagogue, I hear his voice at certain prayers or hymns. I remember how much joy he got out of singing that particular one. And when it comes up, he is again with me. I'm going to wait for that. And when it comes up, he is again with me, and I am singing with him. It is the harmony of voices that makes the legacy. The way I tune myself to him and feel his spirit singing through my own voice. Even now, we are singing together. It was Christine. So even now, we're singing together. So actually, what is a legacy? It's these small things that are taken up by those who follow. I can provide whatever I provide. But in the end, my legacy is not up to me. It's up to whoever comes after to pick up this bit, remember that part, find harmony with whatever note as it may apply to their own circumstances, which I know will be different from mine. You'll take what you choose, what you need, just as I did. I can only wish you well and wish you peace. So one last time, I remember my mother's voice, and I repeat what she said to me. As she looked across the mud and the agony, trying to get my attention, trying to imagine a future, trying to invoke hope, trying to bestow the only blessing that in the end this world allows. Go, my child, go. Go, my beloved children and grandchildren. Go, my dear comrades and friends. Go, my kind listeners. Go. Thank you. We're on time. Don't go. Because now, we'll take a little time, whatever we need. But now we do the shmooze. Now we get to really engage and talk with each other. Take whatever time you feel like, of course. But I want to say we fully welcome any reflections, comments, critiques, whatever is on your mind. We have some time to do this, which is what Sid would have wanted, and I sure do, too. So the way I thought we'd do it, Jamie, is we'd go starting in the room.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, and then take something from the room, and then someone online, and sort of flip back and forth.
Want to lay down a few ground rules.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Ground rules.
Well, first, and if you'll indulge me, I have had many of those conversations with Abe Christine in the Voice Vision office. By the time I had come, we were relegated to checking his stocks for him every day, which was great. But
See how many.
my story with Abe, and I'll just tell it quickly,
Quickly.
is after I got my PhD. After I received my PhD, I defended my dissertation. Sid was on the committee. I came into work that next Monday. Abe came in the office, and he said, and I'm not, well, I heard you got your PhD. I said, I did. I'm finally done. Congratulations. Now pull up your pants, tuck in your shirt. You're a big mocker and doer now, and you need to start acting like one.
Big shot.
Yeah, well, I never made it quite as a mocker and doer, but here I am. So I just wanted to say a few things about the format of the Q&A. Since this is, as Hank says, a deep schmooze, we encourage everybody, both online and in person, to participate. In-person attendees may raise their hands and a microphone will be brought to you. Zoom attendees, please use the raised hand function on Zoom and you will be unmuted and you can ask your question or make your comment directly to Hank or to the other panelists.
Right.
I'm assuming are very happy to be engaged. In order to give as many people as possible the opportunity to participate, we would ask that you please limit your questions to one at a time. Keep them brief. If there is time permitting, we will allow follow-up questions from individuals. Comments are welcome, but please keep them limited and brief. Many of us here today are deeply engaged in this work and have been deeply engaged in this work for a long time and have our own stories to tell. And while this is really appreciated, we're here today to hear Hank's story and Augie's story and everybody else's. But so just keep that in mind, please. And time permitting, we will take questions then through the Q&A function on Zoom. So,
Sehr gut.
thank you very much.
Okay. So
first question goes to an in-person audience member.
Yeah, I'm going to stand just because it's easier for me to stand.
I just want to make a comment here about what you said about Aggie's final goodbye with her mother. I've been looking at the book recently and enjoying it a lot. And the mother said something I found really rare, what she said to her. She said, "Go, my child, go. I will see you tomorrow."
We will see each other tomorrow.
We will see each other tomorrow, even more so. And I think that calmed Aggie I call her Aggie, you say Aggie. I think it calmed her, and it was the best thing that the mother could have ever said. And even if tomorrow wasn't actually tomorrow, it will be tomorrow in heaven. And it set Aggie to be able to go on from there.
That's what she says.
It was extremely strong and loving,
No question.
and that is a key piece from that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to quickly, because it goes with exactly what you said. Augie had a recurring dream in Birkenau, in Auschwitz. And the dream was she was in her mother's lap. So this stayed with her, which is where the last time she was with her mother.
In the train.
In the train. But as she said, when I said this, the dream kept being interrupted. This was classic. Primo Levi describes similar dreams where there's a moment of support and shelter, and then it disappears. As she said, the barbed wire showed up. So the dream dissolved,
The flames.
but it kept recurring. But it dissolved, but it kept recurring. Again, contradictions and complexity. Yeah. Thank you. So maybe
Our first question from online.
Yeah.
Ready? This is Luis Carlo, Sotelo Castro.
Louis,
Yeah, thank you. Do you hear me?
I hear you. Can't see
Well,
you, but anyway.
Thank you, Hank, and hello, everyone. And thank you, Hank, for the very moving presentation and all the testimonies and performances. I want to make one comment and ask one question. So one comment is that, well, as you know, I am into oral history performance. I'm professor in the Department of Theater at Concordia University in Montreal. And I want to say the words of the text are not separate from your performance. So your presence, your body are inseparable part of the text. So in a way, it's a comment, but maybe a question, and that is to what extent you imagine other people performing those words, right? And that's one thing. And then the other is that my work has to do also with survivors of the Colombian armed conflict who are displaced and live in Canada and also in the United States and etc. And right now there is an ongoing question about transitional justice in Colombia. And so I was wondering if within your conversations with the collaborators with whom you worked, there was ever a question about justice, because the emphasis is on memory lost. It's beautiful, but I wonder if there is anything that was said about justice, and if so, how come it's not there, so to speak?
Where there is it not?
Well, or perhaps it is in the book, but I didn't hear anything about justice, which is an interesting point. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, so quickly in terms of what I did today, it's nice in a way. Louis is a theater guy, wonderful man who I met sort of through, well, I don't think you were in Montreal when I was there, but we met later in another conference. But what I did today, I did not think of as a performance. When I do Remnants, which I did not do today, it's different. This is all verbatim. Remnants is not entirely, it's crafted verbatim. Although, as I said, with Augie, it's not clear. Some of these accounts were really co-created, as we say, yes? We borrowed from each other. But, in terms of the first thing, I fully agree. This is why, as Christine said, my advice, and I don't mean a performance, but I mean even if you're reading this book, in a closet or wherever on your own, I hope some people will be inclined to read it out loud. Because speech, as we know, whether call it oral history or call it life, is not just noise that comes out of a mouth and a lung. Yeah? Some of us use our hands a lot, and our chests and our legs, and my God, when I have performed remnants, it's not what I did today. The next day, I mean, it's that good tired when you really feel it. It's like every muscle in your body, you don't know you're using them. But it all goes into it. It's, sorry for this weird analogy, but it's like what they say in a golf swing, which I used to enjoy. It's like everything is part of it, and it's all got to be coordinated. So the physicality of voice is something actually I talk a fair amount about in the book, and something I paid a lot of attention to. Is that the first question, Louis?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So as far as justice, check out Remnants again. I mean, you may be reminded in the fifth monologue, the one just before Vanity, Augie's, the guy that says, I looked at that, I'm not going to do it full bore, son of a bitch, and I said, I'm going to survive you, blah, 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 blah. It is full bore rage. Now, he's not talking yet about justice, he's talking about vengeance. Because that's what a number of people talked about. So it's fully represented there, at least as far as rage, at least as far as, which is poison. Justice is not, but rage carried it. Another survivor said to me, you know, it hurts me, he said, rather than anybody else to carry that. And I do think it's one of the so-called legacies that has been incredibly agonized for people to carry. Because rage there's not much to do about it. But other people, although it's not represented in what I said today, do talk a lot about justice and the lack of it that followed the Holocaust. Yes, there were some famous trials and so on, but from their perspective, as we know, because it was in the interest of the U.S. to get some nuclear scientists from Nazi Germany and so on and so forth, history that we all have heard. To quote a survivor named Victor directly, they didn't pay. Not much happened. So, yeah, at the time, when it may have mattered, I mean, there were trials. Christine knows much more about this than I do, actually. You know, Auschwitz trials into the 50s, when Jean-Marie mentioned earlier, he first wrote some of what John quoted during an Auschwitz trial in the 1960s in Germany. So it went on for a while, but, you know, without being any kind of expert or close. I would say dribs and drabs, more symbolic, except I suppose if you were the convicted than otherwise. So, yeah, limited. The guy, Victor, I mentioned, used the Yiddish expression. There was no Yosha. I think I'm translating that right. There was not justice from his perspective after the Holocaust. There's been a lot written about this in recent years, some of the trials and similar that followed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. From the room.
Yeah, in person, raise your hand.
Okay, a couple.
I'm sorry, so Megan will help out with that, so.
Hi, I'm Ron Stockton. I just need
Hey, Ron.
90 seconds to make a couple of points. First, I'm going to buy this book. I'm going to read it not fast. I'm going to read it very slowly. I'm going to reread parts of it.
There's free copies over there.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Secondly, for those of you who knew Susanna Hicks, she was a transcriber for Sid. She was a wonderful person. She died a week ago, 2 weeks ago. If anybody is interested in leaving a tribute, her new name is Emilio, Susanna Emilio. She has a Facebook site, and her son is monitoring that. So if anybody wants to leave a tribute for her, you're welcome to do that. It's still up and active. Third, Sid and I did a joint memoir. We sat down and interviewed each other on 9 separate occasions. And we transcribed, Suzanne transcribed that for us. and it's available. We call it Colleagues in Conversation. I don't have any hard copies left, but if anybody would like a digital copy of that, I'm happy to forward that to you. Give me your email before you leave. Thank you very much.
It's online, isn't it? I think I've seen it
It's
online.
online, yes.
Yeah.
You can find it online, yes.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Let's go back to the Zoom. Anybody? If I don't see hands, I will call on someone in the room.
I have a question if I turn it into a seminar, you know, but only if,
Okay.
we'll wait.
No, it's fine.
We'll go
Actually,
into Judith.
the lady here and then Mackenzie.
Many of you, oh, thank you. I usually don't need a microphone. Okay, I'll try not to shout too loud. So for many of you, you've known Hank's work for a long time, and I'm sort of a newcomer to Hank's work and just continue to feel so grateful for it. My question is both for you, Hank, and John, your first colleague on the panel, who I know his work is the Holocaust and genocide. And it starts with a comment, but there really is a question here. Sometimes when people are studying very focused and very passionate about a certain issue, particularly around injustice and genocide, there's a misunderstanding, I think, that people then are my blues are my blues and better than your blues. And I would like both you and John to maybe make a comment about, as you did this work and as you continue to do this work, how has your trajectory in terms of compassion and understanding of just the broader pain of the world, how has that transformed you by being so deeply immersed in the Holocaust and the pain and injustice and horror of that?
Yeah, John is the right person to ask as well. I think just for me, I will say, sometimes I describe my field as disposable people studies. And because there are many reasons, aside from genocide, why people end up being disposable. Because they're in the way of somebody's drug that needs to be approved, or somebody's housing development that needs to be created, or somebody's whatever. People who, relatively speaking, don't have power, don't have influence, don't have pals speaking up for them. So, you know, I won't be specific, but I mean certain causes I will say I've been involved with that have nothing to do with this topic that I think are informed. When I met people who were out of luck and felt, how can this be? These are, you know, people who are used to having a certain, they're not wealthy people, but they're used to having a certain privilege in the world, at least they presumed, something that we're all sort of indirectly experiencing now. And suddenly discover I have no recourse. How can that be? I have no recourse. I can't, a lawyer's not going to help me. It's not going to work. So in that sense, and then speaking of Montreal, I had the great privilege of sometimes sitting in on meetings. It sounds like a weird bar joke, but with a Holocaust survivor or two, a Rwandan genocide survivor, Cambodian genocide survivor, Haitian survivors of torture, political torture in Haiti. And these were amazing conversations just among each other. Nobody confused one history with another. Nobody got into the, you know, my pain was bigger than your pain. And we know, you know, yes, that goes on in the world. We know that. And it's easy to get absorbed in one's own thing. And, you know, beyond reason. But these were extraordinary experiences, and there was no shortage of things to talk about. How do we talk to our kids? How do we deal with loss like this? How do we deal with rage? How do we deal with the issues of justice, or lack thereof, that Louis raised? So these are better, I mean, richer conversations when influenced by a range of histories and a range of perspectives, in my view. And the fear that some people have of, oh my goodness, we're going to lose the uniqueness of this or of that, I haven't seen that happen. I would say just the opposite has happened. So I wonder, John, want to add? If he's there, he would be online.
He's
Now, am I unmuted?
You're
Can
on.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hank, when you were talking about the legacy that Augie left, as I recall your comments, you repeated again and again the word go, go, go. And I think in response to the question that I heard a moment ago, that would be my response as well. But I would link it up to the passage from the survivor, Jean Amaury, that I quoted earlier, where he said that nothing is resolved, no conflict is settled, no remembering has become a mere memory. What happened, happened, but that it happened cannot be so easily accepted. Amaury was talking about justice when he made that comment, and he did not accept it. And as a person who studies the Holocaust and genocide and thinks about ethics, I don't accept it either. So my response, my way of thinking about go, 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 is to resist, to refuse to accept, to try to go in a way that never again is too trite, it's too overwrought, but to resist the forces that put people in the situations that Hank, your survivors, and the losses that they experienced were in. So go, where go means resist, refuse.
Thank you.
okay. Let's switch to a Zoom person. Daron Ruske.
Old friend.
Hi, Hank, and
Hello.
everyone else. First of all, I wanted to thank you for allowing us to all be a part of this. And I wanted to just make a comment about that your words, both in Remnants, in your first book, and what it sounds like in this book, I must admit, I have yet to read it, but I'm looking forward to it, just ordered it on Amazon, is that you allowed us in to the deep relationship that you created with these survivors. And as someone who got to work with you and study with you for many, many years ago, it wasn't just in the words you wrote, but in the ways you interacted with them and thus enabled us to sit and schmooze and have dinner with these survivors. So Augie is not just somebody on paper, but somebody who I, through you, got to know. Abe is somebody who I got to know through you. And you changed my life in that. You changed my experience of what a survivor looked like and felt like. And I will be forever grateful to you for that. And I just wanted to express that to you today.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it? Not to change lives exactly, but if it happens, it's a blessing. And obviously, as I said, you know, my blessing was the way my life was changed in my relationships with Sid and with Augie and Abe and the survivors. And in teaching, that was the hope that, you know, I could. In the case of Augie and Daron, as you remember, you had direct meeting. In many cases, it's not direct. But still, I like to feel that even though Jean-Marie was never in the class, because he was no longer on the planet when we did that, nor was Primo Levi. If one takes enough time, reads out loud, there are ways to bring even people who aren't here on some level. But it does matter, in my view, of course, that people are really present. And yeah, I'll stop. Anyway, there's no replacement. Those conversations are mostly in the past, for which I'm grateful. As I said at the start, connection leads to disconnection, but we're left at least with gratitude that they were, and that they were shared with people like you. Thank you.
Mackenzie.
Thank you very much for being here, sir. Just from this initial impression you've already shown, you are one of not only the most well-spoken individuals I've ever had the pleasure of listening to, but also one of the most intelligent. You mentioned during your presentation that you would bring in Holocaust survivors to your classes and recount and have them recount not just their testimony, but also read from it. And the thing that struck me most was the instances of black humor among survivors, like when they were comparing the muddied fields behind the Holocaust Museum in D.C. to Auschwitz and similar camps. This bit of a, sorry, I'm off track of thought. What was the reaction of students to seeing this side of Holocaust survivors? Because you mentioned you want to emphasize humans, not artifacts.
Right.
So.
Exactly, I think basically what you're saying is like, they're real people. How surprising. I mean, there's always the irony. So many classes use Spiegelman's Mouse, the graphic novel, some of us would say comic book or whatever. And my students inevitably would say, he's so real, Vladek Spiegelman. I mean, he's a little mouse, right, in the thing. But the mouse is real because of how he's presented. With warts and all. He's not an easy dude. And he's funny, and he's a pain in the ass, and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, that's the point. I mean, Nancy and I, my wife, have talked about, there's all this work recently. There have been a number of books on humor during the Holocaust, as though, and I said, can you imagine? I say, like a bunch of Jews wherever, and there wouldn't be humor? I totally politically incorrect. We're not Presbyterian, for God's sake. No, but sorry, Presbyterians, I apologize. I am now going to be taken out to Venezuela or wherever they're going to send me. But yeah, no, everybody. I mean, I think, look, there are limits. Even among those of us who come from tribes that partly survive by being able to stand back. Just like Augie's dream. There were times when there was no humor, when it was not possible. There was no standing back. All there was at such moments, if you were still alive, was numbness. I mean, the only way you could get through those kind of moments. There was no speech. There was silence, there was mutedness, obviously terror, which, if it didn't kill you, which it could, you essentially went numb. So in those conditions, there was no standing back, no joking. But short of that, what Primo Levi used to call moments of reprieve, between those horrific moments, there was some room to stand back. And of course, a lot of this was after, some of the stuff that I mentioned today. But some of it was during, too. Indeed. So, yeah, it's complicated, as always. But the main thing is that people are people. And to quote Augie yet again, a mensch is a mensch, and a not mensch is a not mensch. And that was true then, and it's true in life. People change, people respond in different ways. But, how could it be otherwise, right? The victims it's a salt shaker. I mean, you had some of everybody. I'll say one sort of provocative thing. Why not? The longer I've thought about all of this, I think our usual distinction between the survivors and the dead, those who didn't survive, is not quite right. What I mean is, anyone who lasted more than about an hour under the killer's rule is a survivor of the Holocaust. Maybe they survived for an hour. Maybe they survived for a week. But they did survive the Holocaust, however briefly, and the big difference, there are many other factors like physical resilience and what have you, and luck, but the main difference between those who were killed, who did not survive, and those who did, was how long was it before luck and chance ran out? How long was it before luck and chance ran out? Beyond that, not so different. That's what I'd say.
Thank you very much, Zach.
Thanks. We have a quick Zoom. Margaret Lincoln.
Yeah, oh, Gigi.
Yeah. Gigi, you're on. Or,
Are we hearing?
let's no, I don't think she's there. Let's take the question from the audience.
Yeah, it's not
Gigi, if you're there, I'll come back to you in a second.
Yeah.
I was going to say that Abe Pasternak, you reminded me of, and he was really a very lively man. He was very funny and exciting, and he was a character. And in the Holocaust Center, there is a clip of him when he first started speaking, and he was leaving the camp. They were all on a rush to get out of there, and he was actually carrying a satchel that had all kinds of money in it. And he dropped it and said, "To hell with this money." And he said, "All I want is a goddamn piece of bread."
Yeah.
And he said it just like that.
A stickler.
And it
Stickle
stayed.
Blutz.
He was amazing.
Yeah, he was.
Thank you for bringing that
Well,
memory back.
Yeah.
We have a question through the Q&A online.
Nancy?
Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy. Alex Dalsman, Axel, I'm sorry, we'll come to you in a second.
Yeah, we're all.
I'm Hank's wife. So as you can imagine, I heard about Augie for a long time, and I want to tell you a memory connected with this notion of these are people. The first time I met her, I was totally shocked. She was dressed stunningly. She loved pretty things, loved pretty clothes. And I realized at that moment that I had this narrow view of what the experience would have done to somebody. This was a person. Some people care about fashion, some don't. Augie did. That was her.
Yeah. When she describes returning to her hometown after, I mean, she was in a place, a sort of recovery place for a few weeks, and then returned back to Munkac in Hungary, where she's from, and didn't stay. But she says she stopped, got her hair done, bought a new sweater. And she wanted to be, you know, styling when she got back to Munkac, and she was. Augie, famously for her extraordinary glasses, she was always, but she was styling. Why not?
So she went in a horse and carriage?
Yeah, in the Hungarian, and here we go, I'm going to get in trouble again. I got Presbyterians, now I'm going to. I used to call it the Zsa factor. There's something about the Hungarian survivors, especially the women I knew, you know, they got style.
She took a horse and a carriage especially to
Yes,
that,
indeed.
so
Yeah.
that she could get out.
Yeah, so the little royal welcome. Why not? Why not? So, good.
We have a question from the Q&A online from Axel Dossman. Hi, dear Hank. Here is Axel Dossman from Berlin in Europe. I'm a historian. For most Holocaust survivors, we are unfortunately too late to repeat what you've done. Sure, now we turn to survivors of more recent atrocities and genocides, or turn to people who did not survive a genocide but also have made human experiences to talk about.
Right.
If one wants to stick with the history of the Holocaust, then we will only have the many recorded interviews. So here's my question. What are the recommendations and warnings for schmoozing with audio and video recordings? That's a good one.
Well, ask Spielberg. No, you know, in my biased view, there is no, quote, substitute, including, you know, there are many ways we have tried, understandably, to keep survivors with us. It's hard to let them go. And some of those ways, in my view, are quite worthy, meaning some of their kids. I'm not fond of, you know, second-generation survivor as a phrase, but on the other hand, look, people who are usually around my age, who are children of or grandchildren of, some of those folks have done amazingly valuable work. No, they're not their parents. No, they weren't there, just like I wasn't. But they have things to share with us, including stories about that help what we were saying earlier about, you know, survivors as real people. You know, especially if you're someone's kid, right? You kind of know them as real people, usually. You may not, whatever, but you know them. So there's that. There's what happened secondarily during the war. I think there's so many ways. Again, a lot of my class was not in person or audio tapes either, or videotapes. It was reading Levy, Amari, Charlotte Delbo, others, in depth, rereading. And not just rereading, but then taking each passage, what did he mean by that? Why would he say that? What's going on here? What do you think? So it's not learning together, as Augie would describe it. You know, Levy et al. Were not there to respond, like whether we got it or whether we missed a boat. Still, you go as far as you can go. So I think given the range of materials we have and the lessons that we learn from other histories, from people who've gone through other hells, which do inform, and I don't only mean genocide. I don't want to go on, but there's so many examples of ways that when you, I don't say compare, I say juxtapose, one history with another, suddenly things light up that you would not otherwise see if you stayed only with one experience. We'd get in the weeds if I got into two examples, but it's quite extraordinary how that can be. So, you know, it takes creativity, it takes luck, and as John just said, we got to go. keep at it, do what we can. I can't resist this. My own would-be dissertation committee told me when I first started this project, a number of you who know this story, they said, Hank, you shouldn't do this interviewing with survivors because the survivors are all dying. And they said, anyway, all the work on survivors has already been done. This was 1975. 1975. If we had time, we'd talk about where the heck did that come from? 1975, 50 years ago. Survivors are all dying. It's you know, whatever else it suggests to me, A, don't make that mistake. You know, don't tell people it's over, forget it, do something else. I don't know what's going to happen and what might be doable. And it also obviously, in a way, radicalized me to say, oh yeah? Well, some dude who's a survivor told me like a couple of years ago that I was the first, quote, American with whom he'd ever spoken. So all the work's done, and I'm the first American? And I heard that many times. It's impossible. They can't both be true. And obviously, they weren't. Those
Maybe,
folks were wrong. Yeah.
maybe apocryphal, but I've heard that Raoul Hilberg's advisor said the same thing.
Really?
Said, yeah, well, go ahead and write your dissertation on the Holocaust. It's your career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and he had his own stories. He had his own struggle. Anyway,
Right.
so
And now we have Margaret, and I think,
now Gigi.
yeah,
We'll
Gigi
stop.
Lincoln. Yeah, I think it's been good. Gigi, are you there?
I am here. Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. All right. Good afternoon. I'm Margaret Lincoln, retired school librarian and Holocaust educator who was privileged to host Hank on 2 occasions when he gave memorable performances of remnants at Lakeview High School in Battle Creek. Additionally, we were honored to have Hank give the keynote at the 2018 Yom HaShoah observance at the Hart Dole Inouye Federal Center in Battle Creek. I offer my heartfelt thanks to the organizers of today's events for making it possible for us to come together to celebrate the most important work of Dr. Henry Hank Greenspan. May we be inspired to join together as upstanders during these challenging times. Thank you.
Thanks, Gigi. And I think that's
a good place.
that is a good note to end on.
Indeed.
I wanna-
Peace, power, and in the spirit of Lagavulin, Salanja.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out today.
In Skol. I'm going to try to do that right. Skol?
Skol.
I hope I pronounced it right. Anyway. All right. Thanks, everybody.